What are the different ways to play staccato? Is there really a difference between finger legato and using the pedal to connect the notes? Should I use alternate scale fingering? These are just 3 of the questions that I've received. To celebrate this channel passing 25,000 subscribers on YouTube, I asked you for questions and you certainly delivered. In fact, I received 25 questions that I've now organized by category. In today's video, I'm answering 6 of the questions I received from you about technique and scales. By the way, if we haven't met yet, I'm Dr. Kate Boyd. I'm a pianist and professor of piano, and I'm on the faculty at Butler University in Indianapolis. I'm so glad you're here. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. The first question is, what are the different kinds of staccato techniques? Basically, there are 3 kinds of staccato technique that you're going to want to use for different contexts. One is finger staccato, the second is wrist staccato, and the third is arm staccato. Finger staccato is when you come off the key from this knuckle, you kind of pop your finger off. And the way I like to think of it is like the keys are hot and you're pulling your finger back from the key. An example of that is the opening of Beethoven's Opus 2 number 1. Notice that I'm coming off the key quickly. I'm not pulling my whole arm back. That would look like this. Right, that you have much less control. The biggest mistake I see a lot of people make is hinging from the elbow and trying to play all their staccato with these enormous motions. So finger staccato is the smallest motion, and you are pulling back using the finger off of every note. The second kind of staccato is wrist staccato, and that is when you kind of bounce from the wrist. It's usually used for repeated notes or chords. An example of wrist staccato would be the opening of Beethoven Sonata Opus 14 number 1 when the left hand has... Obviously I can't use finger staccato on these chords. I can't like play and then pull back with my fingers from that knuckle here, but yet I don't have time to go with my whole arm. I have to hinge at my wrist. The third kind of staccato is going to be arm staccato, and that's that bigger motion that I mentioned when I was talking about the other 2 types of staccato. That's where you hinge from the elbow. You're going to use arm staccato when you have big chords. An example of that would be at the end of Opus 2 number 1, measure 150. We have these big chords. Right? So here I'm playing, I'm coming up. You use arm staccato also when you have big romantic works like Liszt and Prokofiev that have big loud chords where you want to kind of like come off the keys this way, hinging from the elbow. So those are the 3 kinds: finger, wrist, and arm staccato. Peter asks, is there really a difference between finger legato and pedal legato? He says, I'm learning the Schubert Impromptu Opus 90 number 3 in G flat major. The issue relates to legato in the melody in the top line. Some people talked about sustained pedal legato versus finger legato. The latter requires more work and some dexterity. Do you feel there's a difference between the 2 and how big of a difference? All right, so Peter, I love this piece. One of my favorite recordings is by Radu Lupu of this piece. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to go out and listen to it. So what Peter's asking about is we have these notes, these chords with the melody and the bass, and those are marked as whole notes and half notes under a slur, and yet there's pedal. It's like, and so you have to figure out, like, do I hold that note while I play the inner voice, or do I play this and then come off and play that, right? I'll show you first of all what happens when I hold it. Sorry about faking a little. All right, so that's what I did. I held my pinky and along with the bass chords, and then I played and I pedaled. I'm going to make an argument for holding the pinky, and I'll explain why. First of all, you can reach it. A lot of times when composers don't have any expectation of you holding the long note, the note that's notated long, they make it really far apart. So if he had written something like... So there I have have to move because it's more than an octave apart. The fact that he voiced it and then it's still within the octave tells me that maybe Schubert would have held it. That's my first clue. The second clue I have is that the note value of the bass note and the top is the same. And so that tells me that Schubert was thinking about them as kind of its own part of the texture that are linked. And so if I have one part of the texture that I'm playing in two hands, but one hand goes, and I'm holding it, and one hand's going, that kind of separates the two hands, which is actually serving as a single part of the texture. So to me, having the same touch, regardless of which hand it is, makes sense. It makes sense to me that I'm not going to have like a chord that spans two hands, but one hand is going to have a completely different touch. Now, those are clues from the score. Let me talk a little bit about the experience of playing it. This piece is in G flat major. It's a very kind of warm and intimate key. These key areas do have symbolic meaning in terms of character and mood. And the fact that this is in G flat major tells us that there's a kind of a warmth and a sweetness about it. I want my hands to mirror the mood of the piece. If this is a very calm piece, I don't want my hands to be like moving around like, it makes it really hard to play in a calm way when my hands aren't mirroring that. So as a person playing this piece, when I hold the pinky, I feel anchored. I feel like it anchors my hand, and I'm kind of pointing my hand to the pinky, which is the beautiful melody that I want to really sustain over that middle line. And then all of this stuff can kind of, because it's like, you know, when you tilt a boat and like one side goes down and the other side goes up, I'm tilting my hand to my pinky, and therefore this part of my hand comes up, and then it's easier to play on the surface on those accompanimental notes. So for me, I feel like I can really anchor myself on that. Anchor, anchor, anchor. So each of those I'm dropping and I'm anchoring. And if I just play, then it's all equal. It all is too much on the same plane. So I lose that sense of depth in the texture. So in answer to your question about the difference between pedal legato and finger legato, yes, there is a difference. There's a difference. I didn't really talk about the mechanics of the pedal, but there is a slight difference in the mechanics of how the overtones sound. But also there's a difference in how it feels to play. There's a difference in execution. And I believe there's also a difference in how that contributes to the character of the music. By the way, if you enjoy my videos, you might enjoy my weekly newsletter. I send it out almost every week, and it is simply some practice tips. It's things I like and recommend. It's a little bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you don't see in these videos. If you want to sign up, you can just point your camera at this QR code right there, and I'll also put a sign-up link in the description below this video. This next question is about scales. Becky asks, what's the best way to practice scales when the fingering numbers are scrambling your brain? I can see where to land correctly, but following the book is hard. But I know it needs to be consistently correct. Okay, this is a great question, Becky, and one that a lot of people struggle with. I have a few thoughts about this. First of all, okay, so this is my favorite scale book, the Brown Book of Scales, and I like it because it has the scales in parallel motion, contrary motion, thirds, sixths, and double thirds, and then it has triads and arpeggios in 2-page spread for each key, and I just really like the layout. And then at the end, it has some alternate fingerings, which is useful. And we're going to get into that in a minute anyway with the next question. Okay, so back to the question about scales and scale fingering. Sometimes I see students put down a second finger and not realize it and say that it's their third finger. So that's the first thing I want to encourage you to do, is be aware of what finger you are playing at any given time. And the easy way to do that is simply to say the finger number out loud while you practice and then check. You don't even have to do it with scales. You could do it with, like, if you're playing a Bach convention, You say 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, for example. And you might have the music in front of you with the finger numbers written in, and then you compare what you're doing to what you're saying. Make sure that what you're saying is what you're doing. That might sound a little elementary, but you would be surprised the number of people who are totally confident they're playing the second finger, but actually it's not. So that's the first thing, is developing that awareness, being 100% sure that you know what finger you are playing. Anyway, about scales now. Let's say that I'm looking at, I don't know why I'm looking at the music, because I know the scale finger. Let's say E major. Okay, a lot of times people see a scale fingering in a book and then they think each individual note. They think 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. But the sooner you can start thinking in terms of hand position blocks, the better. So rather than think 1, 2, 3, think three notes, 1, 2, 3. That is all under one hand position. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, one hand position. And then there, and then there. So that what I'm doing when I move, I'm playing that group, and then, so then all I have to do is figure out where does the thumb cross. That already reduces the number of different activities I'm thinking about in one scale. I'm really only thinking about 2 hand positions rather than 7 notes in one octave. I'm not thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm thinking that. I would encourage you to just practice it with those groups. All right, so that's the first thing, is don't think about individual fingers, figure out the hand position groups, and then practice those. The second thing is to be aware, and you probably, like a lot of you probably already know this, but the 4th finger only happens one single time in any given octave. In every scale. I mean, except like one exception, which I'm not going to get into. But so like in E major, the 4th finger happens on D sharp in the right hand. Therefore, if I know that 4 is on D sharp, I'm not going to put 4 on A because I can't, because I'm saving it for D sharp. When I'm coming down, I'm playing it on D sharp, and I've already used it up for the octave. Therefore, when I come to cross over, I can't cross 4 over, because when I think it through, oh yeah, I already used it up on D sharp. When you practice scales, focus on what note the 4th finger plays and memorize that. And then every time you play it, before you play it, think what note is 4 on, and focus on that. So those 3 things, be aware of finger numbers actually being correct in your brain as well, practicing in hand position groups rather than individual notes, and memorizing exactly where the 4th finger comes in every octave in each hand for every scale. Richard asks, are you familiar with the book, The Art of Piano Fingering, A New Approach to Scales and Arpeggios by Penelope Roskel? She uses the principles, okay, there are 3 principles here. Number 1, fingers 1 and 5 prefer white notes. Number 2, bridge fingers prefer playing on the black notes. And number 3, when you go outward from the body, the thumb comes after the black note. So he gives an example. For example, D major scales use the left hand fingering 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2. And C major arpeggios in the right hand are 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2. Any opinion about this? I think it's really important that you use fingerings that work best for your hand. And those are very ergonomic fingerings. And as a matter of fact, if the Brown Scale book, which I mentioned a minute ago, has alternate fingerings in the back, and they follow this principle. So we have a G major scale in the left hand starting on 3, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3. And then we have on D and so forth. So there are these alternate scale fingerings. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I can see that, it's kind of like an upgrade to our standard scale fingerings. I would just say that I think it's good to learn the fingerings that we've been using for centuries at the piano so that you know them and you're comfortable with them, if for no other reason than to be part of the tradition. I feel like, what we're doing is a long tradition, and it just makes sense to me to know the scale fingering so that you know what you're changing and what you're not doing if you do alternate scale fingerings. Just to clarify, the scale fingering that is the traditional scale fingering would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, instead of 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, etc. I think the most important principle here, though, is to be consistent. The reason we practice scales is not so that we can employ this same fingering and be correct and follow the rules. It's because we have so many scales in our repertoire as pianists that to pre-learn them by knowing them really, really well, it makes it so much easier when you actually encounter them in the repertoire. Like if you look at Beethoven, Schubert, Mozart, Liszt, Chopin, all of those composers use a lot of scale passage work. Therefore, if you decide that you're going to, that these alternate scale fingerings, if you look at Penelope Roscoe's book, oh, by the way, I have this other awesome book of hers. I don't have the one that you mentioned, but I'm curious to read it. But I do have this great book, The Complete Pianist, and it has so much information in it that if you're curious to learn more about Penelope Roscoe and her approach to the piano, you might check it out. I know it has accompanying demonstration videos and so forth too. So like that's a whole wonderful resource. And I'm sure that her book on scale fingering is also very interesting to look at as well. John asks, you have recommended that fingers should be in line with, that means parallel to the keys rather than angled away from them and pointed inward. So in other words, I recommend that your fingers are aligned this way with the keys as opposed to pointed that way or even that way. I have also heard recommended that the hand and fingers should be aligned with the arm, and thus the hand needs to pivot from the wrist slightly to one side or the other to ensure that the finger or thumb is aligned with the arm. So I think, John, you're saying that the finger should be straight from the arm, and so if you're playing like the second finger, you need to pivot to make that a straight line, and that a straight line, and that a straight line. And the question is, aren't these two recommendations contradictory? I honestly don't think these two things are really in contradiction, because basically you're not like an engineer when you play the piano. We're not like looking for a straight line and then like everything we have to contort ourselves to make the straight line. What we basically want to avoid are sharp angles. We want to avoid a situation where we're doing this at the piano or that at the piano. And the way I think about it is kind of having like a bow or an arch from your elbow, from your shoulder, all the way down through your elbow to your hand without any sharp angles. If you're playing in a part of the keyboard, like maybe you have to go down here, then it's important to align yourself in front of that part of the keyboard to avoid reaching so far over your body that you have a sharp angle. So back to this question of alignment, basically, it's more efficient, like the playing mechanism goes straight back into the keyboard. We have the key, we have the hammer, all the escapement mechanism, and then hits the string. And the most efficient way to approach that is head on, because then all the force from our arm weight can come into the key and operate kind of as one. Because here, if I go at an angle, my energy is going that direction, but the key goes that way. So that's the principle behind it. The way that I think of this is that you have, for example, okay, so I'm playing this Beethoven Sonata. Here's my thumb. You can see there's not a sharp angle here. It's basically aligned with my arm. Then I play this note, the F. My hand twists a tiny little bit to be straight on there. And now look, my finger is coming along to my arm, but I'm not like putting my elbow in such a way that my whole arm is flat, because that doesn't give me any freedom here. So what I'm focusing on is the alignment here. Then I play the A flat. To do that, my hand has to, well, it's similar to the second finger, but now my hand is behind my third finger. And again, my third finger is coming into my arm. You don't see like a sharp angle. You don't see this. This would be a sharp angle. There's a kind of a directness here. Then my thumb comes under. As my thumb comes under, my arm comes out in order to avoid an angle like that. My arm comes out. There's that line. Then here's my second finger making a line. And then the fourth finger. So you can see my hand is not like this anymore. It's more like this because I'm making that straight line, and then my fourth finger comes into my arm. What I'm doing here is every finger is realigning itself to the key, but I'm not thinking that my arm, and I honestly don't think that wherever you heard that, that person was also saying your arm has to be like lined up behind your hand. I think saying your arm should be lined up behind your hand is another way of saying avoid sharp angles in your wrist. All right, my next question is, how do you play softly without sounding wimpy or timid? This is a really good question, and it speaks to the question of dynamics and tone and how those two things intersect, plus any individual instrument that you're playing. Maybe let's go back to Schubert Impromptu we were just doing. It's marked pianissimo. All right. Now, the most important thing to understand is that dynamic markings are not absolute. In today's culture, we kind of want certainty. We want absolute answers to things, when in fact, there's a lot of nuance. And we have to remember that composers, back when they were writing, and they had oil lamps and they were writing on parchment and they were using quill pens, they didn't have this idea of the world as like, okay, we need this many decibels. This many decibels means this loud, and this many decibels means that loud. When we're looking at a lot of this music that we love to play, they write pianissimo or they write piano. It doesn't mean that a piano in Beethoven is going to be the same as a piano in Schubert or even Chopin or Liszt. Each composer kind of had their own idea of what that meant in their mind. And even within one piece, if you see a forte or a piano, it depends on the character of the music. So I do want to say that as an outset is I think people see like piano or pianissimo and then they just instantly think, oh, that means I can't make any, like it have to be as quiet as possible. And then the tone goes away. So I'm using this example of the Schubert because we will have a melody and then a bass and then some interior part of the texture. Okay, so pianissimo does not mean all the voices have to be the same, because if it were, it would all just be kind of so quiet and not all the notes would sound, right? And I wouldn't hear. So actually, physically, when I play that melody, it feels more almost mezzo forte-ish, to be honest. That's going down and I'm riding the key to the bottom. And then the bass, I'm listening for the bass note to be a little less than that. And then the interior voices, those are truly neutral or pianissimo. And I want those to just float on the surface. Okay, now honestly, in answer to your question, those do sound kind of like there's not a lot of, they sound almost wimpy. If that was the melody, I wouldn't really hear that as the melody. So sometimes you do want to play softly and have it sound without a lot of tone or wimpy, as you said. Okay, so that's the first thing, is differentiate when is piano or pianissimo in a melodic line and when is it in the accompaniment. When it is in the accompaniment, you do want to kind of pull back on the tone and have it sound very surfacey and neutral in the texture. When it is in the melody, you need it to have a kind of minimum tone quality that you kind of can't go below. Let me find another example. Let's look at the slow movement of that. Okay, good. So we have, okay, perfect example. This is a chorale style. And a lot of times people would see at the beginning piano, and then a lot of times I hear this with students, they just play everything quiet. Okay, so that's quiet, but it sounds a little wimpy. And that's because I'm not giving enough tone to the melody. I'm going to keep the left hand the same. I got to hear the A. And so I'm giving it enough sound in the melody to stay inside that frame so that we have something that the ear can grab onto that sounds like the melody and that leads us through the piece. So my answer to you is think about the context of the piece, the character of the piece. Think about what does the dynamic piano or pianissimo mean in that context. Find the voice that's the leading voice or the melodic voice. Make sure you give that enough tone. Listen carefully to the sound. And that might not actually literally feel piano or pianissimo, but that's okay because the overall aggregate of the sound is going to still be in the character of piano or pianissimo. Thanks to everyone for your fantastic questions. If you want to see the other Q&A videos in this series, I'm putting a link to that playlist right up there in the corner so you can check that out. I'll see you in the next video. Happy practicing!